the new sets of regulations that are coming out in the form of the Cyber Resilience Act. I can tell you that I looked at it from both the corporate standpoint. Okay, what does this legislation and regulation set mean to a company in particular, as well as what does it mean to the various open source foundations and the various open source projects that we participate in, that Ericsson and many other companies thoroughly rely on, right? And certainly for a good portion of the year, that legislation was quite troubling to a lot of open source developers and a lot of open source foundations. I think everybody agreed that the intent of the regulation was good and was going to be goodness for everybody, be it users through the entire ecosystem. But how it was implemented could be a problem, right? Most certainly for the foundations and for individual developers. That's what had me most concerned, because it had the opportunity to really threaten the way open source could be actually done, at least within Europe, which again, Ericsson being a European company was rather impactful. But now, as that process ran through, and in the end, the open source ecosystem was heard from the legislators who were doing that work. And we now have the final draft, and it has wording that pretty much everybody in the ecosystem believes is going to be okay and that we can all live with. Now it turns to, what do the companies actually do to properly manage that open source and the vulnerabilities associated with that open source coming in? Again, something that everybody agrees is good. And everybody is willing and accepts should be worked on from a standpoint of, we deliver software, we need to make sure that we know all the software that's in the thing that we're delivering, as well as that the vulnerabilities are managed and under control and understood. And given that so much of that is coming from open source, that could be an issue. And so the question is, do companies now try to figure out how to do that on their own? Individually, or is there going to be some kind of push within the open source ecosystem to significantly improve the way versions are upgraded across all the open source components, better SBOMs that are happening across all the components so that everybody in the ecosystem can benefit from it? Or are we going to do this one company at a time? So that's now the new question, right, for 2024. And I think that will be an interesting one. And I do think that supply chain security is going to continue to be a very hot topic. I think we're in a world state right now where we have to expect that there will continue to be significant attacks from state actors. And open source is still going to be a place where those kind of vulnerabilities can occur. So if I look into 2024, I predict there will be at least one other event similar to Log4j that is significant and pretty ubiquitous across the ecosystem. And the open source ecosystem and all of the companies and individuals involved are going to have to respond.
We were both following the CRA, how it evolved in 2023. And as you said, the CRA itself landed at a place that currently looks doable from open source perspective. And it's somewhat in the hands of companies who are using open source software and somewhat in the hands of the open source ecosystem. However, in my experience, when it comes to companies and corporate organizations and open source strategy, involvement in open source, that is still a huge challenge. Do you think that something like the CRA, as it is written currently, do you think that could be finally a driver for companies who are currently using open source but not involved to actually get involved, and others who are involved but more in a siloed way or still in somewhat of a bubble to look into how to collaborate with others more, whether they are partners, competitors, customers?
I'm certainly hopeful, right? I think that the CRA and similar legislation where individual companies delivering software, and by definition, that software is typically based on open source, often substantially, substantial portions of it being open source, every company is going to have this requirement. And similar to other collaborative coordinated activities in the past, when a group of companies have something very similar to accomplish, and it's not particularly differentiating to get it done, it's just that it has to get done. Those are exactly the kind of platform activities or full breadth activities across an industry where we do see collaboration that does work. Be it a bunch of organizations coming together for OpenStack to have a virtualization environment, or the Kubernetes ecosystem, or what have you. I find this to be very similar in that we now have a requirement that has to be met to be able to do this, and it's a requirement that nobody pushes back on and goes, well, that's a bad idea, right? So everybody goes, this is a good idea. And so, like I said, we can either all do it individually as different organizations, or we can do it collectively and save a lot of time and money ourselves. So do I expect there to be significant collaboration? Yes. Do I expect that there will still be free riders that aren't participating but are indeed getting the benefit from that? Yes, I expect that to happen as well. But getting back to the goal of the CRA with having those organizations that are in the best position to do the work, that's now in place. And if we do the work together, then we'll all benefit as members of that ecosystem.
Yeah, I'm very hopeful too. However, at the same time, just kind of knowing human nature, I think there will be a couple of actors who will need to burn themselves to different degrees before they decide that it's probably actually easier, cheaper, and less effort to go and collaborate with everybody now.